I'm good.
To
How are you?
balance all these.
No problem.
Yeah, you guys are.
That's why you guys.
Commission to order for Wednesday, January 16, 2019. It's 5:30 p.m. Call roll, please.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Nancy Ide. Here. Commissioner Rachel Lyles Smith. Here. Mayor Holliday.
I didn't get the first name. Here.
Your last name's not Smith.
So discussion item is PC 19-006, Oregon City School District request for comment on urban growth boundary expansion proposal. Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. The school district approached the city to inform us about an application they were considering submitting to Metro Regional Government to expand the urban growth boundary. The subject site is about 32 acres north of Holcomb Elementary School. So the purpose of the meeting tonight is for them to engage with you and inform you of the project. Also, as a part of their submittal to Metro, who reviews it with their requirements, we need to submit a comment. And so the comment essentially asks a couple of questions, but it talks about how this urban growth boundary expansion will affect the efficiency of our utilities elsewhere, if we were to include it. And then it also asks for your overall position on the application. And so tonight, the applicant's gonna talk to you a little bit, and then at the end of that, maybe we can talk again about what your overall position is. Also, after this, I want to confirm we have clear guidance as far as next steps moving forward. The proposal written in the commission report was to get your overall direction now, then we'll fill out the comment form, and then we'll do a resolution with that comment form and put it on a consent agenda on a future commission. And also the other question is how much you want to stay engaged as they move through the urban growth boundary expansion process with Metro. We know when it comes to development, there's many, many steps, and there'll be many more with us later. But with that, a presentation, I want to call up Board Chair Connie Kuderman.
Actually, I'm going to defer to Mr. Rogers.
Or Wes Rogers.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Holliday and City Commissioners. We're glad to be here with you tonight. I'm Wes Rogers, Bond Manager for Oregon City School District. Previously, you've seen me, I believe, at mostly Planning Commission meetings as the Director of Operations. I want to thank you for allowing us to be here tonight and take up some of your valuable work session time. We would like to discuss, of course, as Laura mentioned, our request for support of an urban growth boundary adjustment. Attending tonight on behalf of the school district board is Chair Connie Kuderman, and she's in the audience, as well as board member Chris Story. And then part of our consultancy team is Mike Robinson, land use attorney, and with Schwabe, Williamson, and Wyatt, Brad Kilby with a senior planner with Harper, Hoof, Peterson, and Regelis, and Todd Mobley, traffic engineer with Lancaster Engineering. They'll be available after our presentation in case we run into some questions where they can provide some expert input. And then we hope that at the end of the meeting, there'll be plenty of time for questions and answers. And as stated before, the school district plans to submit an application to Metro to amend the urban growth boundary, or the UGB, so that a site can eventually be annexed to the city for construction of a relocated Ogden Middle School. And that school would be adjacent to Holcomb Elementary School, as seen on the exhibit behind me. And why are we here? I think Laura pretty much summarized that. We're here to ask the City Commission to consider a comment to Metro in support of our UGB amendment subject to school district complying with, of course, all the city requirements for annexation, site development, and any needed street and public utility requirements or improvements. So let me explain more detail why we need this property for a future middle school site. The district needs to locate a new site for Ogden Middle School for several reasons. One is the current location and building falls significantly short of our emerging middle school standards that we've developed over the last couple of years as we've been considering what to do with our aging schools throughout the district and our plan to construct a replacement Gardner Middle School. And a relocated Ogden would also be constructed with proceeds from a future bond request and would take approximately 1 year to design and about 1.5 years to construct. The current site has constricted access via a dead-end, unimproved paved county road. The current site's on Donovan Road off of Holly Lane. All students and staff members, if you know the area, have to drive to get to the site. The use of modular buildings at the current site is not a long-term solution for student occupancy, and common areas of the school, like the cafeteria and gym space, are totally inadequate to support the current enrollment. The district will eventually need another elementary school on this side of the school district. I don't think I need to talk about all the annexations that are going on in the area and the future developments, but we will be needing a new elementary school sometime in the future on that side of the district. And the current Ogden site and a renovated building would make a great elementary school in the future. The new site, as shown on the exhibit behind me, is next to an existing elementary school. And collating schools on the same site is a K-12 design standard throughout the country and in Oregon, and provides greater efficiency and shared facilities that provide greater opportunities for both schools and both student bodies. The new site's fairly flat, and it's located, of course, adjacent to the city limits and to public utilities. The new site also has access to multiple entry and exit traffic locations. As you can see, as Holcomb Elementary School has access there, as well as some other roads that intersect and are adjacent to the property that we're discussing. The two schools on the new site would have staggered start and end times. Our elementary schools currently start earlier than our middle schools, and so those traffic impacts would be staggered as well. So buses would be arriving and leaving the elementary school, and then shortly thereafter, 20, 30 minutes later, buses would arrive and depart the middle school, as well as parents who are delivering their students. The new site has enough acreage to meet our, as I stated, our district middle school design standards. And one of those standards is to be a regional community recreation site. We have a very heavy use of our district facilities by community recreation groups. And we are very keen to that commitment to the district, both as just a member of the community, as well as the fact that we have most of the green space play fields in the city of Oregon City, when you look at our acreage. And currently there are no significant parks in this area, and we imagine that we will have somewhere between 5 and 10 acres of play fields. Currently our design, if we can bring it in within budget, would be for a full-size track and 1 baseball field and 2 softball fields, as well as some other play spaces outside on the campus. Long-term, this site would be centrally located to its feeder elementary schools when the district hopefully constructs a future 3rd middle school in the Beaver Creek Road area. I know that was a comment that we've received from many people about our presence in the Beaver Creek Road concept area or in that general area. We keenly want a 3rd middle school in that area because it balances out the other sites of the district where our current middle schools reside. Other land in the area was examined, and none was found that met our design standards or other land use requirements. And we can discuss that in more detail at the end if that's needed. Residents, students, and families in this area will have the choice to walk to and from school. Currently, you can't walk to and from Ogden unless you live right next door, and that's about six homes. Currently, that would provide, and if we do relocate to this site, both residents of Ogden and Holcomb on certain places can walk to and from school. And with some improvements and traffic changes on Holcomb Boulevard, we hope that we can actually have residents on the other side of Holcomb Boulevard be able to walk to school as well. And finally, and most importantly, the current owner of the property is open to negotiations for sale of the property to the school district. And now I'm going to hand it over to Mike.
Thanks, Wes. Hi, Mayor Holliday, members of the City Commission. My name is Michael Robbins. I'm the land use attorney. I'm here tonight on behalf of the school district. So my role is to talk to you tonight about the land use process, why we have to make this UGB application, the schedule that Metro's code dictates that we make it on, what we look at, and then if the UGB amendment application is ultimately approved, what else we would ask the city to do in the future. When we sent you our January 7th letter, I think we had 4 exhibits attached to it. Exhibit 3 was sort of a very simplified land use chart. So that's what I'll be talking about. If you want to look at that, feel free. And as always, if you have questions, ask me, Wes, the 2 board members, or Todd or Brad. That's why we're all here tonight, is to answer your questions. So when we were engaged by the school district and we knew they were looking at this piece of ground, the first thing we did was sit down with Tim O'Brien. Some of you may know Tim. He's a senior planner at Metro. He handles all the UGB work. He's been there a long time and he knows just about everything there is to know about expanding the UGB. And I should add that if you've ever looked at the Metro Code, it's complex, of course, and it has a number of provisions regarding UGB amendments. One of the striking things to me is has an express provision for amending UGB for public facilities, city facilities, county facilities, and school districts. And so the application we're going to make is based on that provision of the Metro Code that allows a selective expansion of the code to accommodate public needs. We met with Tim at least twice, maybe 3 times, to get his sense of what we would need to do, how the process would work, and how we would have to coordinate with local governments, including this city, the county, and the other service providers. We've also talked to Laura a couple of times. We met with Laura and Tony, I think just after Thanksgiving, certainly before Christmas, to talk to them some more about what we would need to show the city and what they thought you would be interested in knowing. We were engaged in writing the application. As you can imagine, it's a fairly complex application, and we're obligated under the Metro Code to submit that application no later than March 15th. And one of the key components that the Metro Code requires is a comment from the affected local governments. County, I think there's the fire district, but most importantly, frankly, to the school district and probably to Metro is how the city feels about this, because ultimately you'll be providing the public facilities and services that serve this site. So all of that has to be part of our application. One other thing before I walk through the land use process for you, your charter doesn't let you provide services outside of your boundary. So if we want to have a school, and we can't develop it with a septic system, it needs an adequate sanitary sewer system, it needs water, it has to be inside the city. And you can't annex a property that's outside of the UGB. So ultimately, we have to be successful with the UGB amendment. We have to be successful with a later annexation application, which requires us to demonstrate that all of your land use regulations and plan policies regarding annexation are satisfied. And then we have 3 land use applications to go through before we even get the building permit. So there's a lot of process to go through, and the burden is always on us, as it is on any developer. So I thought I would just walk you through that process. And as I said, I tried to describe it without boring you with a lot of unnecessary detail in Exhibit 3, but again, we're here to answer your questions. So the first thing we have to do, as Wes has explained, is submit our UGB amendment application. That requires us to do a number of things, but probably the most important things are these. First of all, as Wes said, we have to explain that there's no land inside the existing UGB or the city that would serve this particular purpose. And so Brad Kilby with HHPR has the hard task of looking at all of the available lands, and you look at things like size, availability, topography, a number of other factors determine whether you could site this facility inside the city or the UGB. Not surprisingly, it's pretty difficult to find this size site with the right physical characteristics that would suit, and frankly, in the right place for the school district's needs to serve this new middle school. This site is frankly perfect. It's adjacent, as you can see from the exhibit, it's adjacent to Holcomb Elementary, it's adjacent to the city, it's consequently adjacent to city services, it's got the right topo, it's got the right size. We have to go through a concept planning exercise that we'll engage in with your city staff that shows how we lay out the site, and as Wes said, it'll be co-located. It's also in an area it's in an area outside the UGB that's able to be brought into the UGB. It's not in urban reserves, but it's not in the green reserves area either. It's an undesignated land, and that's a unique opportunity to add land to the UGB. We think this UGB process will take about 6 months. It could take longer. It depends on the normal thing that you experience in your hearings. How many continuances are there? Does the hearings officer or the Metro Council want more information? We think it might be finished in September or October, the public process at least. And by the way, all of this timeline and all this process is subject to appeals. If we were appealed, you could probably add a year or two to the timeline. So that's the UGB amendment process. I'm fairly confident that we'll be able to come up with an application that factually and legally supports all of the criteria. If we get the project amended or approved and the UGB is amended, we'd come back to you for annexation, and that also includes mapping it with the appropriate comprehensive plan map and zoning map designations. Annexation, as you know, requires compliance with your factors in your municipal code and in the comprehensive plan. It's a public process. It starts with a recommendation by your planning commission, followed with final action by this city commission. That decision is a land use decision. It can be appealed to LUBA. Again, with the assistance of your city staff and city attorney, I'm confident we could make the right findings that would satisfy first your planning commission and then the city commission. And I will tell you, well-written findings with evidence will always generally work at LUBA. We were just down arguing about the Park Place annexation. And it's important to have good findings and good evidence. But I'm confident that the information would be there for us to do that. If you ultimately decide that you want to bring this property into the city, and that's probably anywhere from 6 months to a year's process, again, without appeals, then we would go on to the third stage, and that's a combined conditional use, design review, and site plan review. And all of those applications are, again, public. Folks have a chance to comment on them orally and in writing. We'd be heard by your planning commission. The only difference with that process versus the other one is that unless there's an appeal, it stops at the planning commission. But if someone dislikes the decision by the planning commission, there's an opportunity for this body to hear that decision. So if we do all that, it's probably, assuming that the school district wanted to march straight through with this, that's probably a 3-year process by the time you get to the last discretionary permit. At that point, the school district could proceed with construction permits and building permits to the city. I should say too that at each step of the way, there's 2 important things that we continually have the burden of proof on. One, we always have to show that there's sufficient transportation system improvements, and that's why we engaged Todd Mobley with Lancaster Engineering to help us. Todd's done a high-level analysis. It's a little difficult to do the more detailed analysis at this point that you're used to seeing. What he wanted to do was identify fatal flaws, but he's done that. He's identified things that we'll have to work on. The annexation and the land use applications also require transportation analysis. And again, as with any land developer, if there are deficiencies in the system, we're obligated to fix those. And that's embodied in both state and local law. The other thing we have to do at each step of the way is identify where we're going to get our services, principally water and sanitary sewer, whether those lines are adequate, and if they're not, are they feasible to be improved? We know they're out there. If you have questions about the service level, Brad, again, is the person to ask those of, but we're confident that we can provide adequate services to this co-located school site. And if there's a deficiency, you have the ability to impose a condition of approval requiring positive resolution of that deficiency by the school district. So to the extent that any developer is required to see that the public is made whole with respect to transportation and public facilities and services, that rule applies here as well. So if we get through all this, everybody approves it, we've done our job, there are no appeals, the school district would be in a position to ask for financing and go forward with construction of this. And we think the timeline for this is somewhere.
I would probably say that the district looks at about a 5 to 7 year timeline. So this would give us adequate time to get all those land use things satisfied, and then give us a breathing time to do some further planning around our middle school programs, and then see if the time is right for another bond issue in the city. And if that were to be supported by citizens, then we would go forward. And if it wasn't supported by citizens, we would wait until it could be supported.
And one question that you might ask, and I'll just sort of anticipate and answer it, but again, if I'm off the mark, please ask, is you might ask, well, why are you here at the beginning of 2019 on this when it may be 2024, 25 before you're actually doing something? It's because land use takes a long time in this state, especially if you do it right.
Tell us that.
It's quick, yeah.
And I don't mean that as a criticism. I think we have a valuable land use system, and it's methodical and thoughtful, and it takes time. So if you're thinking that you want to do this in 5 to 7 years, you'd actually not be very, you wouldn't be doing a good job for your constituents if you didn't start now. So that's why we're here. We hope at the end of this that you will feel confident in supporting the UGB application. I will say, and I think I said it in my letter, but I've certainly said this to Tony and Laura, and I think Wes agrees with this. We would be happy if you support this, but with a reservation that you're not supporting future actions. You need to see those applications, and you may or may not support them. But I think it would mean candidly a lot to the Metro Council to have the City Commission support the UGB amendment with whatever sidebars you wish to place on it. That's all I have. We're all here to answer your questions, and we do appreciate your holding the work session for us tonight.
Hang on. Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, this is it's a work session, so it's not much of an issue tonight, but I wanted to just call out, of course, I'm an employee of the Oregon City School District, which may or may not be an issue that citizens want to bring up as a possible bias, and you have the ability to tell me what to do as well. But I assume I just want to let that known, and if there's an issue with that, someone tell me there's an issue with that. But we're not making a decision tonight, and so it probably won't be an issue for tonight.
This is a policy question,
Right.
Rather than sort of applying criteria at this point. I think that the instructions are that staff is looking for a little instruction on
I
the
just wanted to
overall
make it-
policy. So
Make it known.
exactly.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Well, I've read all the information that was put forth for us to read, and actually I have the same question that was posed by Mr. Robinson. Why this property? Why this property? And over the years, I've lived here since '94. When I built my home, I've watched schools be closed. I've watched schools be leased. We've also had discussions with Wes, and sometimes annexations do not equal increased enrollments. We've seen a lesser student population. I feel that we were in a process of abandoning the inner city, and I find that not favorable. I know children have to get up earlier to catch the bus to get to these locations. Every educator knows that youth doesn't function well early, that they would prefer to get up around 10 o'clock in the morning, if that.
So would teachers.
Now, somebody pass me a tissue. I worry about the leasing of existing schools, and I saw the statement about providing for community recreation, which I don't find that to be a primary responsibility of the school, playing fields and such. That's not our primary responsibility. Our product is to turn out an educated product who become good and prosperous citizens. We have a Parks and Recs department that deals with that aspect of it. I look at 32 acres, I question what's the largest school we have inside the city in terms of acreage. And I know you're talking about a campus, and I know that's an attractive proposition to some, but I'm concerned about the infrastructure. And because every time we do these things, we deal with each project as if it exists in a vacuum. But what happens when we combine this with the other projects that are about to happen? Can we provide what's necessary to support this type of endeavor? And I don't like it that we do things in a vacuum, and I specifically struggle with traffic studies. I know what roads service that area. They're already difficult, they're going to become more difficult. And as we build other residences up there, it's going to become increasingly difficult. So what's the totality of the impact? I question if our market served is the students, present and future. I hope the school district has a map of the concentration of that population, where they exist now, where they're projected to exist in 5 to 7 years. So I've got many, many reservations about this, most of which stems from, I feel like we're abandoning our inner city. If our goal is to infill in our housing and provide more inner city living, you know, I was fortunate enough that I was able to walk to school. I would love to see our children walk to school. And I don't like seeing people having to be bussed all over. So I know the focus is on this. Sometimes I think we get myopic, we get tunnel vision. It's like, let's do this. This is a wonderful grand plan. Let's not exclude alternatives immediately. So, you know, asking me to support this summarily tonight, I would not be ready to do it in the absence of additional information. Thank you.
Was there a question in there somewhere?
No.
Okay.
No, there's no question in my mind whatsoever at this point.
Commissioner Smith, you have anything?
Yes, I have a few questions. Do you have a plan B? Is there a second site that was looked at that was another good alternative but got struck down because of some reason?
My response would be, we have time to decide on what our plan B would be. We have all the data to go back to and study about what would be the second best location. But at this point, we want to ask for the best location for the future of the school district.
Okay.
That would be my response. We desperately need to do a better job at middle school instruction, today's middle school instruction, not the 1950s middle school instruction when most of our buildings were built. And so in that case, we would go back and study the rest of the land options that we have and see if there isn't something else that could be close to this site.
Okay. The letter that you provided for the traffic analysis, the Lancaster traffic analysis, says that the Oregon City Transportation Engineer reviewed this analysis. Do we have any comments from the city on that?
We do not. Their transportation engineer consulted with our transportation engineer to just do a general framework, and he said that they're going in the right direction, but still need more information. I mean, it was so early.
Okay. I will say, when I look at your figure 1 of the middle school attendance boundary, I'm really surprised that we're looking at a property that's on the very far outside of your attendance boundary. I would have thought like something more around the Beaver Creek, and you mentioned the Beaver Creek area as maybe a future site. So in that sense, I'm in line with Frank that I have reservations of making all of those people drive all the way across the city in order to get to a middle school that's closer to the river and on the very opposite side. You know, it's definitely not centered. It's not even close to being, doesn't even look like it's inside your boundary. So yeah, the placement seems odd. I did think that there was a discrepancy in the number of acres. I thought, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the report said you were looking for a 32-acre site, and yet I think this property is only 24 acres. So maybe there was a discrepancy in numbers, but it just called my attention. So I was like, well, are you looking for a 32-acre site, or are you looking for a 20 to 22-acre site? And so, I don't know, I do have reservations. I also have reservations about the UGB amendment happening in Portland Metro, and our citizens maybe not knowing about it or not having, not going to Portland in order to voice an opinion. So just the public input on that piece, maybe you can comment on if this has happened in the past and what our citizens have said in that regard. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor.
Sorry, I said a bunch of stuff.
No, that's okay. Commissioner Smith, let me just respond to 2 of your comments.
Okay.
It is 32 acres.
Okay.
I think Wes and I went through a math exercise to make sure we were reading the correct tax statement, so it is 32 acres. And with respect to the metro process, it's a lot like your local land use process. We have to include in our application a title, or not a title report, a list of property owners within a certain radius. Those folks, the cities, the service districts, and I want to say, and I may be wrong about this, I'm not sure, I think that recognized neighborhood associations get notice. If they don't, the school district is committed to outreach to its stakeholders, including the city's neighborhood associations. All those folks get notice. They can go downtown to the Metro office to participate in person if they wish, but Metro also takes comments by mail and email. So if someone wasn't able to go downtown or didn't want to, they're certainly able to participate fully in the process otherwise.
Yeah. I guess and the last thing I would say is, you mentioned safe routes to school and the walkability, and there's a lot of concern from people that live off Holcomb right now and in that neighborhood about the traffic on Holcomb Road. I heard last night at the Parks Visioning thing that Nancy and I went to, of the ability to cross Holcomb Road is very challenging. And I don't think many families would find it safe at all. And my concern, and maybe this isn't too early of a concern, but when I jog around our high school right now, we don't have connected sidewalks between the high school and the community college. And I was told that the reason that didn't happen was because the school district, we couldn't come to an agreement on even just connecting a little stretch of sidewalks. And so that really concerns me.
Could I correct that?
Sure.
There's a pathway. If you go to, I want to say, the northwest corner of our property.
Yeah, you go past the JRTC building, go all the way back, there's a pathway that cuts
There's a
through.
very nice, brand new
Yes, I'm aware
walking
of that
path.
pathway.
And so it isn't a sidewalk, it's a pathway meant to handle multimodal traffic, non-motorized multimodal traffic between the two facilities, and then that's connected directly onto the path system of the community college. It's actually considered part of the city's trail system and provides connectivity across that boundary. And then once Myers Road is extended, you will have connected sidewalks then all the way along Myers Road and across Highway 213 and into those neighborhoods as well. We take connectivity very seriously, but we can't connect what we don't own. And so we did do the pathway. It used to be old gravel and dedicated a fair amount of money to get that upgraded because we knew there were a lot of community users as well as our own students use that as well. So I guess in my view, may not be sidewalk, but we do have paved hard surface connectivity between the two sites and the neighborhoods.
Okay.
So Commissioner Wright.
So I've been sitting here for a couple of years, and I remember, with your bond measure and a lot of different opportunities for you to talk about your plans. And I know that this is something that you've been looking at for a long time. You are the experts in education and as far as where schools would best be served in the community to the students. And I live, as the crow flies, I guess, about a quarter mile from the site. So I'm right in the neighborhood. I know, I watch children and, young middle schoolers walk back and forth in front of my house all the time, every day. And so I know that there's a lot of students that are in that area. So, as far as where this location would draw from, if you've got Gardner up on the hilltop area and another middle school in this area, it just seems like you've got the extremes, not extremes, but the different directions. So I like the fact that it's flat, and I'm sure that you do too for ball fields and those kind of things, which I think rounds out students and as well as just the other aspects of education. But I think that this is so preliminary. We'll have so many questions later on down the road, and I think that we'll have the opportunity to ask those. But my main concern for even the validity of this is the access. If the main entrance is going to be off of Holcomb Boulevard, that's just something that we've talked in the in the city for a long time about are those two intersections down on 213 and Redland, and then Holcomb and Redland. So, and we have that in our plans to improve. And it sounds like you're far enough out that, there's a good chance that those could be improved by then. So, I think there's just too many unknowns as far as, making specific decision about the building aspect of it. But as far as just making the request for expanding the UGB, I don't have any problem with that at this point. So many things can be determined down the road. So anyway, those are my comments.
Okay, so to echo Commissioner Ide, let's try to focus on what's at hand here, and that is just the request to ask for our blessing to go to Metro and ask for the UGB expansion. There's going to be a lot of time and a lot of questions to be able to be asked, both in the annexation procedure and then in the final land use, through the planning commission, all that. I'm sure a lot of those questions will be answered. Well, they'll all have to be answered to either the planning commission's satisfaction or the city commission's satisfaction before anything can happen there. The one question that I have is for Ms. Richter. Let's assume that we give our blessing, the school district goes forward, they get an annexation approval from Metro, or not an annexation, but a UGB expansion from Metro. And then at some point in time, whether it's in the annexation process or it's in the land use process, that the city makes a decision that doesn't work and they can't build there. What happens to that land then? Does it revert back out of the UGB?
That's the problem.
So I guess that's we're talking about.
I mean, there is a process for Metro to take things out of the UGB. I mean, there is a process to do that, but.
We need a process for us to do it.
Could that reversionary clause be added into the boundary expansion so that if it wasn't used as a school, that it would revert back out of the UGB?
I'd have to think about that. I've never seen that kind of a condition.
But normally UGB expansions are, for the most part, go through the normal process. So it's a pretty rare situation that we're in here where we're asking to bring 32 acres into our UGB specifically for a government entity. So hang on, Mike, I'll give you a chance.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
So if that all, doesn't work out, I would be concerned that we brought this land in and now it's going to be something other than what we had planned on. And of course, I'm going to be out of I'll be out of the picture by then, but I still, have a question about that. Mr. Robinson?
Thank you. I apologize. My right hand raised involuntarily.
That's all right.
So I might add to what your city attorney said. There are two things. One, I know for sure Metro will do, and there's a second that you could ask for. Metro will condition this to be used as a school. You wouldn't be able to use it as a public park or for housing or for employment uses. If it comes into the UGB, it comes in for this particular purpose. That will be in Metro's approval. But the second thing you could do is you could ask Metro to condition, to provide a condition that it's the applicant's obligation to remove it there is a process in the statute that allows removal of land from the UGB. I think this would be, frankly, relatively easy if you weren't going to develop it for a school because that's its sole purpose. And you could ask Metro to condition the approval on removal of the UGB as a burden of the applicant if it's not used for a school.
Okay. Well, that's the only thing that would be hanging me up, is to make sure that if it comes in as a school, it's going to either be a school or it's going to go back. And so with that, I would say I'm certainly in support of planning, long-range planning for organizations, just like we're long-range planning for police and court facilities and public works and other things. And it's still really early on. I think Commissioner O'Donnell has something to say.
I was just curious about the summary that Mr. Robinson just gave. if the burden of having it removed from the UGB falls to the school district at that point, what's to say that that will or will not be granted?
Commissioner O'Donnell, my opinion from knowing the statute, and I'm not going to give you, I would just tell you, I don't think it would be I'll put it in technical terms, big deal if it came in for a school and there was evidence to Metro that you couldn't get it annexed or you couldn't otherwise do something that everyone had anticipated, that they could bring it out. It's a little different, if I might add. It's a little different than bringing land into the boundary to satisfy the 20-year housing need or the 20-year employment need. This is for a particular project, and if that project wasn't able to be fulfilled, I don't think the statute would be hard to satisfy to remove it.
Yeah, from my viewpoint, I'd almost like to see that to be an automatic. We don't have to go back and petition. If it can't be used for that, then automatically it goes back.
There are no automatic things.
Well, that's too easy.
Yes, you're right. That would be too easy.
Commissioner Smith, you had something else?
Yeah, a couple. So, my concern is that staff, both in the staff report and even tonight, said that we're being asked to address the services issue, which is the issue. So if this was something that we could give a blessing with without addressing that issue, I might be more open to that. If we have to in any way acknowledge services on that site, there's no way we would consider this right now. At least I wouldn't. Because of the issues that we still have questions about transportation. I appreciate the conversation about park space, or at least the recreational space. Clearly, the school district has land all over that's used in that way. However, that doesn't in any way need to be something that we consider in our services, because our obligation is to serve park space. Of course, we know that we can't do that up there, and we aren't doing that up there, and that we're extremely behind on parks. So that's a huge service issue in this city, which causes a problem for something like this as well. So I'm worried about that. Even though we don't need to, of course, provide park space to a school, the acknowledgement that 5 years from now, there may be a school there drives development there, because kids know and families know that there's going to be a brand new school up there, and the effort to want to build a new house up there is going to go up, which means then we have more of an obligation to serve that. And so that's a huge concern. I don't necessarily have a problem, supporting this process of bringing that piece in the urban growth boundary if we don't have to acknowledge the service issue and can do something that says we support that, but we don't support any future steps, which you kind of alluded to as an option. But I think the mayor brings up a huge point. If we don't have any assurance that if the school district changes their mind later, and this is not going to be a school, and it's in that urban growth boundary, then is it going to become houses? Is it going to become what? We don't know. And if we don't know that that's an assured thing, then I think that's a non-starter.
And I want to point out that sorry to interrupt, but the template that is provided, there's some check the boxes choices.
Okay, so
I support approval, I am neutral, I oppose approval, I support with conditions. And I think what you all are talking about is the I support with conditions,
Right.
and those conditions are a mechanism to get it out if the school doesn't happen. We haven't studied the utilities. We don't have an application to study the utilities anyway. So
I think the big one for all of us would be that there's a mechanism in place to pull it back out of the urban growth boundary if for whatever reason it can't be used for the purposes that we're bringing it in for. And then the rest of those things can be satisfied through either the annexation process or the land use process after that.
Well, I think that's still a condition that we support this, but we don't know. We can't make any judgment on services at this point. Yeah, I think we need to acknowledge that.
So are we in general consensus on that?
We'll be bringing it back.
Yeah.
So
Okay. If there's none, Mike, do you have anything else?
Maybe, I do very quickly. Yes, and perhaps as overkill, just again, I want to emphasize, if it comes in for the school, you can't use it for housing, you can't use it for anything else. So we wouldn't be able to sell it to a residential developer because they couldn't use it for that purpose.
But if it isn't automatically pulled back out, then we have a 32-acre orphan property that can't be done anything with.
And I believe it's possible, and if that's your instructions, we could include in the application a request to Metro that they have that provision requiring us to take it out of the boundary. You wouldn't have the burden, we would have the burden.
Okay. Then we're done. We've got an exec session following this and then a meeting after that. So
Thank you.
thank you for your time.